There is a general consensus that Canada is old America. Indeed, in Canada, the old traditional towns from the time of exploration have survived in large numbers with their authentic setting and community. If the states have more cowboys, Canada still has trappers. Canada is still a constitutional monarchy. Much of the legislative customs come from the British Parliament, just as in the US. The political system in Canada has been in place since the enactment of the British North America Act of 1867, and the head of state is the British monarch. Canadians and Americans are both similar and complete opposites. Americans are generally more sociable, patriotic, conservative, religious, and traditional. Canadians, on the other hand, are more reserved and at the same time more liberal. But before we get started subscribing to our channel, like and share the video on social media. Next, we'll cover 18 differences between Canadians and Americans. 1. Homes. In general, American and Canadian homes are similar, but there are still some differences. For example, Canadians tend to be less likely to have a huge mansion with a large lawn, and Canadian homes tend to be smaller than American homes. U.S. residents, on the other hand, mostly believe that the bigger the better. Also, most Canadian homes have basements, since utilities run underground and need to be protected from frost, and spacious backyard porches that expand the living space. 2. Immigrants. The U.S. considers itself a melting pot, Canada a mosaic. For the most part, the U.S. has a strong mix of immigrant cultures, while in Canada newcomers are more likely to stick to their language and traditions rather than assimilate. Also, Canada's immigration rate is about 20% higher than the U.S., making the Canadian population more culturally diverse. 3. Liberal values. Politically, Canada is more liberal than the United States. Of course, Canada has a conservative party, but the political system is generally less polarized than its southern neighbors. 4. Communication. Canadians have a reputation for being the friendliest nation. This stereotype probably stems from the fact that they often apologize even if they are not guilty of anything. The brain in the North is so saturated with apologies that when I sneeze in my car alone while standing in traffic, I say, "sorry," out loud. It's not a joke. I've done it several times, says the Canadian author of the article on the travel website. Canadians are always correct to the person they are talking to and rarely get into an argument. They often say, "excuse me," and "I apologize," although they are not always at fault. It is more of a way to get your point across without hurting your opponent's feelings. 5. Products. The thing that surprises Americans the most is Canadian milk. In some parts of Canada, it is sold in bags because it is cheaper to produce. A Canadian family usually buys 4 liters of milk in 3 clear bags. In the U.S., milk is not found in bags, it is sold in cartons and in plastic containers or glass bottles. As in the U.S., fast food restaurants are popular in Canada. There are McDonald's, Burger King, Pizza Hut, Starbucks, and other establishments on both sides of the border. That said, Canada boasts its own Tim Hortons coffee shop chain, with restaurants even open in several American states. 6. Work. Americans are believed to work more than their neighbors to the north. Canadians with 1 year of experience in the same company are entitled to a 2-week vacation, with experience of 6 years or more a 3-week vacation. Canadian employees are given 30-minute breaks every 5 hours. All of this is regulated by legislation. Many people in the U.S. believe that you must be willing to work 50 hours a week to show that you are worthy of respect and your salary. Canadians, on the other hand, prefer to work 40 hours a week and spend the rest of the time with their families. 7. Religion. A survey by the Pew Research Center found that Canada ranks 12th among the least religious countries. Only 27% of Canadians reported that religion is an important part of their lives. Meanwhile, in the U.S., more than half, 53%, of respondents said so. 8. System of measures. In the U.S., the old British imperial system of measures, ounces, feet, miles, Fahrenheit, is still in use. Canada has officially switched to the metric system, but Canadians often use the imperial system in everyday life. 9. Sports. In general, the typical Canadian pays less attention to sports than the typical American. However, there is one exception: hockey. The popularity of this sport in Canada knows no bounds. Every city has a skating rink, every school, college, or university has its own hockey team. Americans prefer hockey to other sports: American soccer, basketball, and baseball. Residents of the United States are proud of their sporting achievements and actively cheer for their favorite teams. However, their neighbors to the north like to remind us that basketball, as well as the baseball glove, was invented by Canadians. 10. Politics. Residents of the United States are involved in politics. They know the names of senators, seriously discuss the differences between the programs of Republicans and Democrats. Canadians are more relaxed. The political situation in the country is one of the latest topics of discussion. 11. Language. In both Canada and the United States, the majority of the population speaks English. However, there are a few differences between the Canadian and American versions of English. People in Canada like to pull the O and A sound. Even in border towns where the population has long been mixed, native Canadians will give themselves away by singing the words. The sound S in the word pasta, the American will almost eat, and his northern neighbor, on the contrary, will make a long accent. And Canadians also like to insert in conversation between words. Awkward pauses have nothing to do with it, it's a style of communication. 12. Emotionality. Americans gesticulate, talk loudly and laugh. But their neighbors are more restrained in showing emotions. They rarely swear in public. To make a scandal in a public place for a Canadian is as unacceptable as walking naked in the street. 13. Slang. Canadians hardly ever use slang. A foreigner will understand a Canadian more easily because there will be no words like a Danish, all baked goods, not just cupcakes, or Ima, immaculate, from immaculate. In the United States, residents of different states sometimes have difficulties in understanding each other. There is enough and about criminal slang, and words used only within a particular city or diaspora. 14. Social distance. Most Americans are easy to get in touch with. They are sociable and can talk at length about their home or hobbies. From the interlocutor, they demand the same involvement in the communication process. Canadians in this sense are introverts. They build trusting relationships gradually. Perhaps, such openness of Americans is connected with the fact that they often move, so adaptation in a new place and finding friends is a mandatory social skill for survival. 1.5. Attitude toward money. An American, if he is not a pathological miser, calmly part with money. When a bill is brought in a restaurant, he simply looks at the amount and pays. A Canadian is more attentive in financial matters. First, he studies the bill in detail and only then takes out his wallet. This approach applies to everything from buying a house to shopping at the supermarket. 16. Appearance. The visual difference between U.S. residents and Canadians is small, but it is still there. The former like to tan, so they stand out against the background of their pale North American counterparts. If a person wears dark glasses at any time of day, he is probably from the USA. 17. Shoes at the doorstep. A person entered the apartment and took off his shoes in the hallway in front of you is a Canadian. It's all about the local climate. Frequent rains and heavy snowfalls are common. An American will never take off his shoes, he will not even always understand the meaning of such a request. 18. Inventions. Alexander Graham Bell is a Scotsman who became a naturalized Canadian and invented the telephone. Gideon Sundback invented the zipper. Hugh LaCaine invented the music synthesizer, and the wonderful game of basketball was created by James Naismith. How Americans and Canadians differ is that Americans excel at using these inventions to create multi-billion-dollar industries. Guys, if you liked our video, but you haven't subscribed to us yet, subscribe right now and post the video in social networks. There will be a lot of interesting things in the next episodes. See you soon. Bye.